Welcome back. This week we're going to focus on wave erosion, wind erosion, and gravity being a form of erosion. So today we're going to look at waves and wind. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the different agents of erosions and the landforms they create, and then make sure that you know the difference between weathering, erosion, and deposition. Just to review real quick, the break, move, drop poem to help us remember the difference between weathering, erosion, and deposition. Break, move, drop, break, move, drop. All of these processes happen to a rock. Weathering breaks it, erosion takes it, and when the motion stops, deposition drops. So weathering is where we're breaking the rock down. Erosion is where we're moving it to a new location. Deposition is when we drop it in that new place. So far, we've looked at running water. We talked about rivers, just water running over the surface of the earth when it rains. We also talked about groundwater. Today, we're going to get into waves and wind, and gravity will be later this week. And then next week will be ice. So waves, you've probably seen waves if you've ever been to the ocean. Sometimes lakes will have waves on them as well. The reason there are waves in the water is because the wind is blowing across the surface of the water, and that converts the energy into the water, and then the waves are created from that wind. When the waves are beating against the shoreline, it can cause sea caves, wave-cut cliffs, sea arches, and sea stacks. Arches usually are there first, and then as they wear away, you can see down here in this picture at the bottom in the right that there's kind of a piece still connecting the two pieces of rock. So you have a sea arch. Eventually, over time, this connecting piece will weather and be eroded, and then you'll be left with just two independent, what we call sea stacks. The waves will carry the rock particles, and when it deposits them, we build up beaches. So when you are at the beach, maybe for vacation, you'll see that the little pieces of rock that have formed the beaches, usually they're very tiny. We call it sand. We also get something called a spit, which sounds really weird, but this is a beach that projects out into the water, kind of like a finger. The one that I always think of is that little like hook piece on the end of the state of Massachusetts. We also get barrier beaches like the Outer Banks in North Carolina. Actually, those are barrier islands, but beaches where they are connected still to the mainland. Same kind of thing as the Outer Banks, but the Outer Banks, they're not connected to the mainland anymore, but they are these buildups of sand along the coastline. Wind also is a great transporter of small particles of rock. It is the weakest of our forms of erosion. We do have something called deflation that happens when the wind blows across the ground. It's going to remove the surface materials. The smaller the particles are, the more likely the wind can carry them. So here we have an example of deflation where you've got your rock. The smaller pieces get blown away, and as time goes on, you get more and more of just the bigger chunks that are left over because the wind is not strong enough to carry those. And at the end, you wind up with desert pavement. This arch up here is a beautiful example of some wind erosion. The softer parts of the rock have already been weathered and eroded away. Down here, this video is going to show some wind erosion happening. This video I took when we were down in Ocean Isle a couple years ago. We were walking on the beach, felt like we were getting sandblasted as we were walking because the wind was so strong, and you can actually see the sand particles being blown across the surface of the beach. So again, that's wind erosion. Now the wind will deposit the particles that it is blowing around. So sand dunes are a great example of this. We've got our little camel up there in the top walking around on the sand dunes, but you don't have to go to another country to see sand dunes. Along some of the Great Lakes and things like that, there are sand dunes there as well. And of course, along beaches and stuff, you can get some sand dunes. We also have something called a loess deposit. We've got these small particles of clay and silt that get built up. Great soil for farming. Let's take a look at some information about the loess deposits.